This is Creepy and Geeky. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, I'm talking to Chris Vander about his new found footage movie, Ask. But first, it's time to talk to Donna about the stuff we got into this last week. How's it going, Donna?
Hey, Robert. It's going pretty well. It's been a long week.
Right? It feels like it's been 2 weeks. I mean,
It
really.
really, I hope it wasn't just me because it was just bad. Like,
It was weird.
it was weird. It was an extremely long week, like
Yeah.
taffy. It was like pulling taffy.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, I'm good. How you
Good,
been?
good. I mean, same. I mean, I've been good, but it was a long week. But other than that, it's been all right. I didn't get a lot done. I don't have a lot to talk about, unfortunately, today. But I got a couple of things. But first up, I do want to talk to everybody out there, and you, of course, that I have fully moved over, both myself and the podcast, over to Bluesky. We are no longer on Twitter. I mean,
Woohoo.
the accounts are still there, but they're not active anymore. They're locked.
Same.
Yeah, they're locked, and they won't be posted to. I won't be accepting new followers. I won't be responding to anybody. It's dead there to me. So if you want to talk to me, you want to see what I'm doing, whatever, come over to Bluesky. I'm geekthulu.com at Bluesky, and the podcast is at creepyandgeeky.com. That's our ats. So
Yeah, I jumped the
yeah.
Twitter ship too, and I joined Blue Sky. And same,
Yay.
just like you, I locked my account. I'm not posting there anymore.
Yep.
It's very toxic
It's
there,
super
and
toxic.
I
It was
it
bad
was
to begin
toxic to
with.
begin with. Yeah,
Yeah. No, ever since he bought the stupid thing, it got real. I mean, it was toxic before he bought it, but it got really toxic after that. And
yeah,
then, like, especially the week after the election, it
yeah. I
really
can't.
got bad. So yeah, everybody that I know has pretty much already jumped over to it, and has pretty much abandoned Twitter at this point. So it's just, but Blue Sky's been a lot of fun so far. There's a lot of
Yeah,
great safety features, great ways to block all the people that you don't want to deal with. And they're always like, oh, you guys are just going to be in your echo chamber. You're goddamn right, I'm going to be in my fucking echo chamber. I don't give a shit what you say. I don't want to hear it. I
we
want to
want
hear
to talk to
nice and
people about stuff that
positivity.
we care about, which is
Right.
horror and geeky shit and
Yeah.
music and things that are important. We don't want to talk about none of that bullshit that y'all want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not here for that.
Keep that shit over there.
This is my social network. You can all stay in your little weird echo chamber amongst yourselves, but they can't handle that. That's the weird thing. They are so funny because they're now starting to come to Blue Sky because they can't troll anybody over there anymore because everybody's left. So
Yeah,
now
they can't thrive
they
without an
can.
audience.
Exactly. And so that's why people on Blue Sky constantly say, and I'll say it too, don't feed them, just block and move on. There's no
Block and move
reason.
on.
There's no reason. That's what you should have been doing at Twitter in the first place. That's what I always did. That's why my shit wasn't as bad as everybody else's. But it's, they have what's called the nuclear block over on Blue Sky. You block, you move on, you don't ever respond, don't ever engage. So trust me, it's been night and day, a so much better experience.
Yeah.
I'm glad everybody's come over and a lot of people are finally engaging over there. That was part of the problem. Was I joined like a year ago or whatever
Hmm.
when it was still under the invites. And but nobody else was coming over because everybody was still stuck in Twitter, which I get, but so I stayed with Twitter as long as I could, but this last week I was just like, I'm done. I can't do it. I hope
Hmm.
everybody else will come over, but for right now, this is it. I'm done. I can't deal with it. So, but yeah, no, but that's it. Then we moved over. I'm still on Instagram. That's my secondary location. Which is fine. It's great for posting pictures. I like Blue Sky because you can do text posts. If you don't feel like doing throwing up a picture of something random or something like that, which I don't do very often. So I like to be able to post over on just a random text post sometimes.
Right.
So that's what's nice about it. But yeah, and I've tried Threads. Threads still has an like a forced algorithm for you page that it defaults to. You can switch it to your follow thing, but every time you go back into it, it switches back to that for you page. And I'm like, no, I don't want to see people I'm not following. There's a
Right.
specific reason I curate my following feed specifically for myself so I don't have to see a bunch of random other stuff. Even if it's stuff I might like, I don't need to see it. I will
You don't
search it
want it
out.
clogging up your feed. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
ridiculous.
Exactly. I will search it out when I'm ready to search it out. Until then, no, get away from me. So yeah, so yeah, it Threads and Instagram both do that. So that's why I'm kind of like not as active on those, and I'm more active on Blue Sky because Blue Sky's just, you know, it's free of all that. It's been
Yeah,
nice.
it's been really nice over there too. And like you
Yeah.
said, the engagement, it's nice being able to,
Yeah.
get the people that you dig and the stuff that they do and for people to see you. And you also said there was something else that you have going on with Blue Sky, right? Like with the grouping certain ones together.
Oh yeah, I created a starter pack for creeping geeky guests. So if you come over to Blue Sky and you want to follow all the people who have been on the show, or you don't have to follow everybody, but you can follow everybody if you want. You can follow individual people you like, but they're all whoever's on Blue Sky currently that I could find,
Right.
then which is most of them. And so you can follow them all there as well. So that was a nice handy feature. I wanted to make sure that everybody got to do, and I'm actually in a few starter packs myself, which has been very nice for people to include me in that.
Yeah, that's
Which I'm
really
thankful.
cool.
Yeah, and so it's been a really net positive experience over there. Engagement is better because it's not nothing's throttled, like people can actually see your posts. So
Instead of
it's
being buried under mountains of bullshit.
yeah, and ads and everything. There's no ads or anything like that. Now, again, Blue Sky is in its infancy, so that might all change down the
Right.
road once they start needing more money to help with their growth and everything. They might start adding in ads and stuff, and let's hope it doesn't. They're talking about I think they're instead of doing that, they're gonna roll out a premium version, which won't affect normal day-to-day stuff, but it'll give you more like options on like um themes and other stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it'll be more like cosmetic type stuff, or maybe some other options, like maybe it'll be like early features that they'll eventually roll out to everybody else. I don't know, but I think that's kind of a neat idea if they do it like that and don't do it as a, well, you have to have this to, you know, they'll, it sounds like they won't use it to promote if you're a verified user like they did before, so it'll promote your posts over anybody else because they don't have like an algorithm like that.
Right.
So it won't matter for that. So that's what is really good. And they said they won't be using anybody's posts or artwork or pictures or anything like that for AI, which has been nice. They're not doing it now and they have no intention to ever do so. So it's really a positive
Hmm.
thing over there. It's
I
just
think so too.
yeah. I can't, if you're not over there yet, please come over because it's been such a better, more positive experience. And I think you'll really enjoy it. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. What do you got today for me?
Oh gosh. Way to put me on the spot there, buddy.
I know.
So one of the things I heard about earlier, and you probably have already heard about it, is that Lady Gaga is coming to the next season of Wednesday.
Had not heard that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'm curious, how people are going to feel about it. I know that a lot of people didn't really care for the Joker
Yeah.
film recently, but it'd be interesting to see what kind of role she would be on this, or how many episodes, what
Right.
that's going to look like. So that was one of the first things. I mean, not too much has been said. Obviously, they're not going to say what her role is on it right away,
Right.
but it's interesting that she's now going to be coming to that series.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. I'm always on the fence about her now. Like back during her like early days, I would have probably been more excited about it.
Hmm.
Um, it seems to me like it seems today like I just been less excited about her over the last few years, and it's really nothing to do with her, I guess. It just I kind of I guess moved away from her as a person. But and like I definitely wasn't gonna go see Joker, but she was the more interesting aspect about Joker
Right.
that would have made me go see it, but I still didn't.
Kind
Still
of
had
glad
no
I
desire
didn't.
to. Yeah, yeah,
From what I'm hearing, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna watch it, obviously, but I don't know
yeah.
how I'm gonna feel about it.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I'm cautiously optimistic, as I like to say,
Yeah, me
when
too.
something like this happens. So it could be a good thing. So that's what I'm hoping for. So that's cool. That's very cool. All right. I did get to watch a couple of movies on streaming this week. I did not get to go out and watch anything. It's just it was a week, and there wasn't really anything super crazy that I wanted to go see anyway. I think the new movie that came out this week was Red One, which is the Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans like
The Santa Claus flick.
Christmas movie. Yeah, look, it looks funny. I like The Rock. I know everybody hates him at this point, but like I still think he's funny. I still think he's I think he needs to kind of get away from maybe some of the humor stuff and maybe go back to because he was doing there was a short bit of time where he was doing kind of gritty actiony kind of
Hmm.
movies, and I liked that before he got into like, oh, he's always got to be the hero mode, like the stuff where he's more a little bit morally ambiguous, and so I dig that era of him, and I'd like to see him go back to that, but I doubt he will because that'll hurt his dollars. But it looks like it could be a fun movie. It looks more like a kids movie than anything else.
Yeah, it'll
Um,
be fun. It'll be cutesy, you
yeah,
know?
I'll probably just watch it once it hits streaming somewhere. I'm not gonna like rush out to go see it. But yeah, so that's why I just stuck at home. I'm trying to catch up on some 2024 streaming things. So I watched Don't Move on Netflix. I know you said you'd already seen that, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that was good. It wasn't great, but it was good for what it was. I think it there were moments where it felt like it dragged on a little bit, even for like a movie that was only like an hour and a half. There were moments where it just felt like it dragged, little tiny moments. It wasn't too bad. But but yeah, overall it was a pretty good tense cat and mouse
Hmm.
movie. So that was pretty good. I enjoyed it for that. But what else you got for me?
Wait, you said you watched two movies.
I know. We'll get to my other one after we do your next one.
I do want to say about Don't Move.
Yes.
Finn Whitrock was the
Oh, he was
scariest
sinister
villain.
as hell. Yeah.
I mean, I knew he could do it because I had seen him in American Horror Story as Dandy Mott, but oh my gosh, he made my skin crawl.
Oh yeah. No, very skin crawly.
He very unnerving. So the other thing I had a couple more things. The other thing was that um I just lost his name. Finn Wolfhard of
Mm.
Stranger Things and Billy Burke. They both starred in Ghostbusters Afterlife. They are going to be doing a new version of Idle Hands,
I
the
saw that.
1999. Yeah. Now, I don't know how you feel about Idle Hands. I actually enjoy that movie a lot.
I
It's
love
real
Idle Hands.
schlocky. Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
It's real schlocky, but I love the B movie kind of
Oh
feel it
yeah.
has. And obviously, Jessica Alba was at her peak hotness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's
No,
it's a
Devon
fun
Sawa,
movie. Oh my
Seth
god, I love
Green,
Devon
Eldon
Sawa so
Henson,
much.
they're all perfect in that movie. Like,
Everybody is great in this.
it's so
Even
good.
Vivica Fox for her little 10-minute
Yeah.
blurb that she's
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested. I kind of don't want people to fuck with the original, but I'm interested, just to see where their heads are at with this remake that
Yeah.
they're wanting to do.
Yeah. Devon Sawa was up for it. So, I saw him online. He said he was all for it. So, that's good praise. And and that's the thing. Here's the thing. I don't mind remakes. I
I
sometimes
do.
they're good. Shush. Um sometimes they're good, but even if they're bad, even if they are good, they're still not going to replace the original. It's rare. It's rare. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, there is some times where a remake will replace the original, like The Thing or The Fly. in the 80s, those both were
Hmm.
remakes of older movies, and they basically become the one that we talk about now. But that's rarer. Um, and I don't think this one's going to replace the original Idle Hands in any way, shape, or form.
Let
But
me
it,
let me rephrase that. I don't hate remakes. I just
you had to say that because I said the thing. So you're like, oh wait, yeah,
not really though. What it is that bothers me about it is that there are so many other things that could be done, and
yeah,
we always default to what we could do this, but we could make it better.
yeah,
Just make something new. That's my
yeah.
only problem.
There's
However, having
certain,
said
yeah,
that, I do love the Thing remake. I'm not going
yes,
to ever
no, I know
doubt
you do.
that.
No, and this is my thing. Like this is why like I think that they shouldn't remake popular movies. They should never be a popular movie that gets
Hmm.
remade. If you're gonna make something, remake something that was like that didn't do well. And like while Idle Hands, I'm not sure how well it did originally or anything like that. That quickly became a cult classic
Hmm.
movie, like amongst horror fans. It was never gonna be like a huge thing, but it definitely is one of those ones that's talked about with praise rather than negatively.
Right.
And so sure, that one probably in my narrow you know justification there, it shouldn't have been made, but I'm still okay with it. It like I don't care if things get remade, they get remade. It's not going to touch the original. Um, or it might, but rarely does it. And so it's like the RoboCop remake. That it's not a bad movie, but it's definitely it's not going to be as
No.
impactful as the original. The Child's Play remake, it has some good moments and everything like that. It's never gonna replace the original. And so that's my thing. It's just that there's certain movies that just you can't touch. Now, that being said, outside of the horror realm and everything like that, I'd love to see them do an update on Brewster's Millions. I love that movie. Richard Pryor's great in that, in the original 80s version, but that in
Hmm.
itself was a remake.
Yeah, it was.
So I would love to see an even more a newer remake that would have to up the money again on it because that's what they had to do for the 80s. So but yeah, so I think it'd be a fun experiment to see if they could make something fun and interesting with that movie. That's one of the ones that I've always wanted to see be remade. So all right. Well, my next thing is I got to watch another streaming movie this week, another 2024 movie, and I got to see Mr. Crockett from Hulu. And that was really, really good. Um, I think Mr. Crockett could not replace, could be the new heir to Freddy Krueger. Because, obviously Freddy can never be replaced. But since Freddy's not being used, um, it's time for Mr. Crockett to
Yeah,
shine.
Mr. Crockett, the Hulu original, that
Yes.
movie creeped me out
Oh,
so
it was
much.
really creepy. Is
The
here's what was
gore was
interesting.
really interesting in that
Yeah.
one.
And it was really good because it didn't shy away from the gore or the language or anything like that. But you have a character who is like it's a Freddy-esque character, but you you're not grossed out by him. Because Freddy was a child killer slash possible molester. This guy cares about kids, and he's actually just killing the abusive parents or people who allow children to be hurt. Which reminds me of a movie that I did an episode on with Preston Falso earlier called The Psychopath, which is an older movie about a children's host who ended up going and killing abusive parents. So it has touchstones to that as well. So I like that aspect of it. So it wasn't just like it was a misguided um, attempt to help children, you know, and um, so I like that the character is somewhat sympathetic at the same time. You kind of feel for the guy, but he's also evil, so you want him to be taken out. But I like that. I like that there's a possibility there's franchise possibility here.
Oh yeah, they definitely left
So
that open.
yeah,
It was very interesting to see a Mr. Rogers slash Pee Wee Herman esque
Yeah.
type of host be so menacing? I mean,
Yes.
his smiles were very
Oh my
unnerving,
God. It was
and
just
he was so intense.
yeah.
My God. Um, yeah,
And
I
being
was all in for the gore. It was too
yeah.
much. It was like wild.
And being a black man, that was even better.
That was even better.
We get another
It's like,
black slasher.
yeah,
It
it's like if
just
you watched one of your Sesame Street, people that
yeah.
you saw on Sesame Street growing up, just
Yeah.
being a homicidal killer. That is nuts.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, hands down, that was one of my favorite ones that I've seen so far.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely one of the better ones this year for sure. Yeah, so definitely go check it out. It's on Hulu now. Um and what was I gonna say? And yeah, go check it out because it'd be great to get a lot of views on it. So maybe they'll be enticed to continue the series. Maybe we'll get a get a new one every couple of Halloweens or so. All right. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I only have one last thing.
All
So
right.
Kevin Bacon and his wife Kira Sedgwick,
Yes.
you already heard about
I heard about it, yes.
it.
But go
So
ahead.
they're going to direct and star in a horror comedy titled Family Movie. And it basically is about a family of filmmakers who find themselves kind of caught up in a real life horror story when they have a body that turns up on their set. And they're basically trying to cover the murder to make certain that they can keep production going. So
Right.
I'm interested to see. Hopefully, when they have a trailer out, I want to see what
Right.
this is like. And even I think even his daughter, the one that was in Smile, she's going to be in this film. I think
And
a
their
lot of
son
their
is too. Yeah.
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 So it's
Both
like a
of their
whole
kids are
family
yeah.
movie,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah, it's going to be all four of them. And it sounds fun. It's interesting to see Kevin Bacon kind of returning to his horror roots. It's really neat that he's
Yeah,
coming back around on that. I thought he was fantastic in oh, what was the movie?
they
Maxine.
slashed them, or did
Oh
you
no,
see
no,
it? Oh,
Maxine.
okay,
Yeah.
he was good in They Slashed Them
I
too.
haven't seen They Slash Them yet.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, so but yeah, he was fantastic in Maxine.
Oh, Maxine, he was a piece of crap.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
was so
Yeah,
gross.
no, he's gross, but that's what's great about him is like this is he feels like it feels like he should have been playing like horror guys for like a long time,
Hmm.
and he hasn't. He's kind of dipped his toes in here and there, but like he's kind of like stayed out of it. And it was kind of an interesting thing too because I know that like in the 80s they tried to position him as like a new leading man, but like
Hmm.
his movies weren't doing well as a leading man. Like Footloose did well, obviously, but like a lot of his other stuff during that time just didn't do well. So he was just like, you know what, I'm gonna be a side player. And that's where we get the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, because he was a supporting actor in a lot of movies, and so it's really good to see like him continue to do that in the now he's dipping his toes back into horror, and he's really he just put out like some kind of reel or TikTok or something like that where he was like recommending like horror
I
movies.
saw that. That was
Yeah.
very cute. Yeah, he had
Yeah.
some good picks too. I
Yeah.
was impressed.
Yeah. So it was just like that's my thing. It's like it feels like he's just like he's re-embracing horror in a big way. So I'm excited for that. So that'll be really cool. All right. Yeah, that's all I have for today. Before we move on to the rest of the show, why don't you let everyone know what you got coming up this week on your show?
So I took another week up. No, I'm kidding. No, I actually did record. So I am still doing the November nightmares. And
Yes.
gasp, everybody hold on, clutch your pearls, whatever. I'm talking about a 1990 film called The Last Supper. I did not mean to talk about it in any political agenda, fashion, way, shape, or form. It just so happened I wanted to talk about movies where people were sitting at dinner tables, and The Last Supper was one of those movies. So it's gonna be kind of ironic considering everything that's going on, what happens in this movie, but it is an underrated gem. I absolutely love this movie, and that's what I'm going to be talking about on my episode. So
I
hopefully
just
you haven't seen it, or if you have, let
I
me know what you think about it.
I have not seen it, but I just read the plot synopsis, and that sounds funny. So
It's a seriously dark, twisted comedy.
yeah,
But once again, not politically charged. It was really just because food was involved and they were
sure.
killers. I promise you. But yeah, but that I'm back with that and continuing that November Nightmare series, and then
Awesome.
I've got one
Yeah.
more food thing before this month ends, so I'm excited.
Yay. Very cool. Yep. So awesome. Well, yeah, everybody stick around. This is not the end of this episode. I've got a conversation coming up with Chris Vander, like I said, the director, writer, producer, and actor of the found footage movie Ask. So stay tuned for that. On this special bonus episode, I'm talking to writer, producer, director, and star of the new found footage movie Ask, Chris Vander. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it. That made me
Yeah.
sound far more important than I actually am. So I appreciate it.
No, yeah, you're important. You made this movie. I mean, this is and you got me the screener to watch, and I appreciate that. And it's actually a very interesting movie. I enjoyed it. It definitely um definitely low low budget. But I mean, I think that's what kind of appeals to it in a lot of ways when you're looking at a found, like you took like the essence of found footage, I think, and really ran with it in a way that a lot of other people don't. And you found a good niche for that. With the, being a YouTube personality and stuff like that. So I found that very interesting and very fresh in a way that other I haven't seen a lot of other people do yet. So
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It was
yeah.
yeah, you're not wrong when you say low budget. It's as close to no budget as I think you're technically allowed to get without saying
Right.
that you don't have any money. But that was by virtue of it was a reason I did it.
Yeah.
I did it on purpose. It wasn't that I don't have any money myself. It was that I've watched the industry, filmmaking, become much more difficult and much more gatekeepy and much more hard for people who are not located in the right town or have the right
Right.
connections or have the resources to be able to make anything. And so I've been telling people for years, just go out and make your own thing. But that rings hollow when you haven't done it yourself because then you
Mm,
don't have proof. Like I
right.
can say it all I want, but why the hell would you listen to me?
Right.
So I decided to issue myself the challenge of like, what's the least amount of money you can spend to make a film that is a feature-length film that gets distribution and is interesting and entertaining. And so
Right.
this is the result of that experiment. And like you said, it's low budget, but I'm very proud of it because I feel like more than anything, it would be incredibly inspiring to other filmmakers to recognize that big ideas and energy are sometimes more valuable and more necessary than anything else.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's, because that's something that you hear all the time. It's like people are like, well, you've got a camera in your pocket. You can just go make a movie with that. You just got to have a good idea. And to be fair, I mean, we've had big filmmakers who have actually made what was it? Steven Soderbergh made a movie on an iPhone. Um, and so it can be done, but I mean, he's Steven Soderbergh. Of course, he's got name and, and everything else. He can get that made and distributed easily.
Yep.
So it's nice to see that, um, that you can do something. If you get the right idea with that, you could do something like, any found footage movie could be easily done. Well, you know, easier done by just using phones and and everything else. And I think that's you've seen that with some other movies like with Host and stuff where they did all through laptop and through Zoom. And so it's interesting to see that when somebody makes a movie like this, when it's good, also that it's that you want to champion that. You want to make sure that people see it and understand, hey, this is actually something you can do. Sure, it's super low budget. It's not you're not going to have all the special effects and everything else, but it's something you can do, and I think that's you've done it well from my perspective. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, ultimately the goal for me was like proof of the democratization of film, like
Right.
if I can make something, that means you can, because I'm not a director. I'm not even an actor. I'm a writer who did all the other jobs because of necessity. I was the only
Right.
one that I knew would show up for no money. Um,
Right.
so and for me the whole thing is like figure out how to reverse engineer the project. So
Yeah.
much of this movie came from me figuring out what do I already have at my disposal. Like I didn't come up with an idea and then figure out how to make it. I figured out what I had and then I reverse engineered to make a
Yeah.
movie out of what I already had. And I think that's the thing you don't hear a lot of people talk about because I think they don't think of that in an artistic way. They think that's
Right.
very mechanical, or they think that's, you know, well, that's not that's a skill. That's not an art. But there is an absolute art to saying, all right,
Yeah.
I've got these three locations, this one guy, I know this thing is happening in my life. How do I take all of those pieces and turn it into an interesting, cohesive story,
Right.
that says something? And for me, that's the thing I try to champion is it's the democratizing of ideas. Like anybody can have a great idea for a movie if you have unlimited funds. The
Yeah.
re the people who are going to make it in the industry, especially in the industry of the future, are the ones that can get that done quickly, inexpensively, and with the least amount of outside help as possible,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's like I've there's definitely a low budget um uh there's definitely people out there making low budget movies. And a lot of times what they have to do is then crowdfund them. And
mhm,
I've crowdfunded a few of those movies myself because I believe in that independent. Like I used to want to make movies myself back in my early years. And I tried a few times to make a couple of things, but it's hard. It's definitely hard. And this was during the like I'm of some coworkers and I was working at a hotel and we made a stupid short horror movie. And we had just the video cameras of the time. I had a video camera of the time. And it's it was definitely hard. Especially because later on I had to figure out how to edit it and I didn't have editing equipment. And then I you know finally got a computer program that I could do it on. But like nowadays, there's so many like easier ways to do it. Especially with digital filmmaking and stuff, it's so much easier to do in a lot of ways. But I still see there's these people doing it, like I said, with the crowdfunding way, and they're doing it in a different way than you were doing it because they're doing it in more of a traditional make a script, get actors, and their crowdfunding is to help pay for all that stuff and everything, whereas you did it kind of how we did it, like back when I did our stupid short movie. Is like we had no money, we just like recruited other coworkers to help us like be actors in the movie, but for the most part it was just me and one of the other guys doing stuff on our own, just being stupid. And yeah, it just with doing it on a no budget like that, it makes it definitely harder. And we did the same thing. It was use the materials around us, and try to do something that was fun for both of us. And it turned into a piece of garbage, but it's a
well, the first one always is though, right?
yeah,
Like,
right,
that's
right,
the job. It's like most of everybody you've ever heard that had a great first film, it means that they had five other films that were very small that they never let see the light of day. So don't
right.
let anybody fool you to think they came out of the gate like that.
Yeah,
Um, but
I
yeah,
think
the other thing that's interesting operating on that level is that, when in the era that you and I grew up in, what is possible now wasn't possible then, not just the
yeah,
technology to make it, but like right now, someone can make a film and they can go to a place like Film Hub and they can get it on Tubi in like
yeah,
a month or two. And if you didn't spend much money on it, you have the potential of being profitable with your film, like
yeah,
in a way that was inconceivable 15, 20 years ago.
yeah,
And so I think it's interesting. Like, I spent literally, I say that the budget of this movie was $250, but a lot of that was I entered four film festivals. So it's the
yeah,
festivals. I probably paid less than $50 for the actual things I spent on this movie.
yeah,
But that was the point, right? I say 250 because I do want people to recognize, some unexpected fees come along somewhere along the
yeah,
path. And I have in fact written an entire book about the process of making this film. I actually,
Okay.
for that reason, I'm working with a publisher right now that's hopefully going to be out in 2025.
Cool.
We haven't announced it yet, but like that was my goal with this project. I want people to see the movie, of course, and I want them
Yeah.
to watch it and enjoy it as a film. But just as much, I want people to see it as a learning process and a
Right.
motivational process. For me, watching that, like I said, I'm not an actor and a director. So if you were entertained by this 85 minutes of film, it means that you could theoretically do something approximating this,
Yeah.
whether
Absolutely.
you're as good a performer, maybe you're a better director, whatever, you can actually do it and you can learn and you can get better. I challenge anybody who thinks that they shouldn't do it to go on to Tubi and just look up found footage. Look at the
Right.
list of movies that are on there that are making a little bit of money right now, and a lot
Yeah.
of them are not great.
Yeah.
So that should be inspiration to you that they did it, I did it. That means you also can do it,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, even if you factor in don't like not going to Tubi, I didn't know that about Tubi. That's actually fascinating. But even if you were just to put it up on YouTube,
Mhm.
that you can get, word of mouth and build that audience for something maybe down the road. You put out something that didn't cost something similar to yours, didn't cost very much money to do. That's kind of what's great about what's going on now in terms of movies and in terms of um movie making, distribution, and everything else is just the pipeline is is both harder and a lot easier as well. If you're willing to understand that you can go this route like you are and make a movie, put it out there, and don't expect a lot of money out of it, but
Mhm.
just hopefully get that exposure for your talents, and maybe that will help you move into um that next project that could get crowdfunded, and that could give you more money to make for yourself, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I know some of these filmmakers that I help kickstart, they take the money, they pour it all into the movie. They don't take any of this money for themselves. They're not enriching themselves off this. They are just making movies for the passion of making movies and trying to get it out there.
Yeah.
And so I love that they are that people like you, people like them are being able to do this and make these and find audiences, and it's just great. Like, and Tubi definitely is a wonderful um uh avenue for that. And even before knowing that about just being able to put your own stuff up there,
Yeah.
that's really good. That's really great. I
Yeah. Yeah.
think that's really
Well,
fascinating how they're doing
yeah.
that.
And just to be clear, you can't just go to Tubi and say, hey, put my movie
Right.
up there.
Yeah,
But
put
there
my
are
movie up.
places, like
Yeah.
I mentioned Film Hub, but there are other ones where
Yeah.
they're sort of, brokers. They have the connection and they can get
Right.
in there for consideration. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, that was impossible years ago. And also
Yeah.
you mentioned YouTube, like Milk and Cereal was a film that very recently
Yeah.
was a found footage film, was hugely well received on the internet. They spent $700 to make that movie. I think it was maybe an hour long.
Yeah.
But I think they've already signed to make another movie. The guy, is it Kane Pixels, the ones that made the first Backrooms films? He's
Yeah.
working with A24 to make a feature film version of it.
Yeah.
And so he went literally from short films, short analog horror stuff on the internet to working with A24.
Right.
So you're right. I guess at the beginning, when I said it's difficult in film nowadays, it's difficult if you try and go through a traditional route. It
Yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No, I
it's
understood
not
what you
as
meant.
difficult doing what you're talking about, which is you have to pave your own road to
Yes.
meet up at some point with the road that everybody else is walking,
Yeah.
and hopefully that unpaved road that you're taking gets you further down the road than it
Right.
would be if you're along with the glut of everybody else
Yeah.
who's submit what I did, back in 2014, I actually wrote a Western film that was produced. It was $1 million Western. It ended up premiering on the Hallmark movie channel.
Right.
It's called The Redemption of Henry Myers, and it was heavily rewritten, but it was by the time it got to screen, that's a big deal for my first
Yeah.
credit to premiere on American cable television. So I was like, oh, I'm set now. This is where the offers are pouring in, right? And then nothing for years.
Yeah.
First of all,
Yeah.
Westerns I love Westerns, but I'm not particularly, there's not a huge audience for them. If I
Right.
don't have any other credits, no one's thinking of me to be the horror movie guy because I wrote
Right.
a sort of softly faith-based Western, which is not what it started out to be. It's what it ended up
Right.
being. So yeah, so I ran into this thing where I just constantly was writing stuff, sending it out, waiting for permission for someone else to turn my
Yeah.
thing into a movie. And then I realized at a certain point, I'm like, I think I've reached the age where if I don't start doing this myself, I will have aged out of the ability to do this. So I got to
Yeah.
just start doing it. And that's where this movie came from, was just sort of like an existential cry to the universe that like, I'm tired of waiting. I guess it's gotta be my time to shine or it's not gonna happen, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's it's really good. And I think again, I think that that also speaks to the avenues of distribution being able to open up in a way like as long as you're willing to understand that that's how it's going to be. Like with something like YouTube where you put it up on YouTube and you just hope for the best. Like you said, milk and cereal. That you know, hoping that it somehow hits and you know that I really enjoy that aspect of it that you can um that like you said the democratization of film. You can just make your own movie, you can put it out there as long as you're not expecting to like have a multi-million dollar hit right away. Then and you talked about a couple of people making it, but I mean, I'm thinking of like Fede Alvarez too. That was the same thing. He started out making short films and posting them to YouTube and got discovered there. And so it's just there's so many people who've done that who have actually moved to the big leagues and everything. But as long
Yeah.
as you understand that's a rare occurrence, and that not everybody's going to get to that point, just make your movies, find your audience, and you can at some point continue to make maybe slightly bigger movies every time. And
Yeah.
that's I feel like that's where you have to you build your audience, build your
Yeah.
build that core group, especially if you're making horror.
Yeah.
Horror is just always going to be that way.
Well, that's a super important lesson. What you just said is you can't go into this with the intent being, I'm going to make a few of these so that I become the next David F. Sandberg who gets to direct
Yeah,
Shazam after
yeah,
making Lights Out. Because all you'll ever be doing is trying to come up with the one gimmicky thing that gets you the
yeah,
attention. And that's the opposite of art. At that point, all you're trying to do is create viral content that will get you attention. That will never create something that is organically actually good.
yeah,
So my whole thing has always been you, you don't want what you're actually talking about, because once you get into that stratosphere, you don't actually have any decision making anymore.
right, yeah, you've
There are other
lost
people are
everything.
telling you
Yeah,
what you can and can't put into your movie, how much time you have to spend on it, who has to be in those roles. You lose so much
yeah,
autonomy in what it is that you want to say. Take advantage of the fact that this movie you're making right now for $250 is might be the only time you get to say exactly what you want with no one
yeah,
else weighing in on it. You know,
absolutely.
every cut is yours. Every take is the one that you decided on. And that's super rare, especially nowadays as movies get more and more expensive. So like
Yeah.
be happy that if you're putting in the effort, that you also get to create the thing that is yours, you know? Like
Right.
John Carpenter used to put his name above all of his movies because he would like, I want all the credit, but I'll also take all the blame.
Yeah.
Same should be true here, you know? Like, yes,
Yeah.
you only had $750, but that's why you should say this movie is your film, for
Yeah.
better or for worse. Everything about it is yours, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. Let's talk about the movie itself. From in your own words and perspective, what is this movie about?
Yeah, the elevator pitch that I've been telling people is that it's basically the monkey's paw for the influencer generation. Is sort of the
Very
like
much. Yeah.
concise description. Basically, it's about a guy who's trying very hard and mostly failing to be part of influencer culture, hustle culture. You know,
Yeah.
the people who want to convince you that they're successful so that you'll follow them and they'll make money off of you, essentially. And he's trying and he's not really succeeding at that until one day he has a meeting with a very strange life coach who gives him some advice. And that advice starts to turn things around for him. And he starts to become very successful. He gets a big following and good things start happening in his life. And it's because of this way he is structured to sort of put wishes out into the world.
You're right.
However, that's, as we all know in a horror movie, when things start coming true, there's going to be a double edge to that sword. And
Right.
so basically his life slowly starts to fall apart as a result of all of the unforeseen circumstances that come from these great wishes that are coming true a little too easily.
Right.
And so that's basically part and parcel the breakdown of the setup of the movie.
Right. So what made you want to tell this particular story?
Uh, well, first was what we already talked about, which was I was inspired to try and make a movie that other people could model as a way to go make their own movie. So that was
Right.
one piece. Another piece was And I'll get into the details of this in a minute, but there were things that were getting ready to happen in my life, real things that were happening. And they
Right.
were too interesting not to utilize in some way in
Right.
a film. And so I did what I was talking to you about earlier, which is I decided to reverse engineer. If this thing is going to happen in my life and I will have the ability to record it, is there some value or purpose that I could use to build this into a narrative to tell a story in? And it
Right.
turned out there were a few of them, big ones, that I could do that with. And so I just started reverse engineering. How do I use these pieces?
Right.
And then the final factor for me was the subject matter of this film. I come from the marketing world. That's what I do for a job. I work
Right.
for an attorney that is amazing now. I'm in-house with an attorney. But there was a time when I worked for legal marketing broadly. So I had a lot of clients and I worked with a lot of companies. And in that industry, you meet a lot of people who purport to be things that they are not, who like to inflate themselves and make themselves look more important and more powerful and more knowledgeable.
Right.
They fleece people out of stuff. And so I felt like I understood who that guy was. I've seen him several times. I've been on
Yeah.
those webinars with those guys. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I think I can understand how to take a version of that, merge it with me, because I'm playing a degree of myself. I use my
Right.
actual name. And so I thought I can find a way to make a character like that a little reprehensible, but also just pathetic enough to be somewhat sympathetic also. Like you
Yeah.
could have empathy for this sort of desperation. And I thought that's interesting because in most found footage films I see the people are not usually very likable. And so you're
Yeah.
kind of rooting against them sometimes, or at the very least, you don't care what happens to them. And I was like, I'd really like it to be the other way around. So what if I have a guy who's doing this and he doesn't realize he gets in over his head, and that desperation is what gets him in trouble? And so there could be some empathy for that because I feel
Right.
like often what's missing. So it was those three elements combined, the things happening in my life, the wanting to make a cheap movie, and also wanting to comment on this, I don't know, the toxicity of like, I don't know what you call it, like toxic positivity in a workplace or hustle culture or the whole
Yeah.
whole idea of the grind mentality. Like
Right.
I don't buy into it. And I sort of wanted to shed a light on that.
Yeah. No, it seemed like it definitely you were talking about, the definitely the hustle culture, and yeah, just the marketing guys. Like you said, it was like multiple styles of people who were just kind of like generally reprehensible that we all kind of recognize are reprehensible. But nobody really comes out and says it. I mean, people do all the time, but for some reason there's still so many people that play into it,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. Especially, in this day and age, it should definitely be something that people are not getting involved in. So, and I do think that you were successful at creating a character that was both unlikable, but also but empathetic, that you could feel for that, he was just this dude who wanted some success in his life and he was doing it by any means necessary, um, trying to do things that weren't the most up and up, but you also weren't out there actively like hurting anybody. I do think it's not spoiling anything to talk about like the first guy you're talking to in there
Mhm.
who signs up for your thing and he calls you out on it about um the what you're saying to him is just like the pablum that everybody says and everything like that, the things you want to hear as a person. So he's just like, you're not really telling me anything of substance, you're just saying words. So I thought that was really great and a really good aspect of that,
Well,
to kind of start it off with.
I'm going to consider that's an achievement. Like honestly, if people only took one thing away from this movie, it would be that, which is I didn't want this guy to look like a villain. Just wanted it to be a cautionary tale because I'll
Yeah.
be honest, to some degree, this applies to me and to a lot of people. Like we're looking for the easiest way to get to the thing that we want, and frequently the easiest way to get to that is absolutely the worst way for you as a human person.
Well,
Like it is
absolutely.
not going to be good for you to get there quickly. And I think things like social media success and passive income streams and things like that have allowed people to believe that that's good, that's right, and therefore that's the way that they should look at all things of value in their life. And I think it's a bad instinct. So, if anything, this movie is meant to remind people that working for something is not necessarily bad. Like the
Right.
muscles that it helps you develop as a human, both physical muscles and also like the psychological muscles needed to be able
Mm.
to do whatever you got to do and take the lumps, and not
Yeah.
succeed right away. Those are important things.
Yeah. No, I mean, because you see it, even with these influencers and stuff like that. Most of these people who've gotten very famous very quickly, who've gotten all that money, they're terrible people.
Yes.
Underneath it all, they're terrible people because they just they did what they could do to basically like scam people or whatever. They did it in such a way that just it wasn't earned. They feel like it is because they hustled and they grinded and blah blah blah, but it's like, sure, but most of the time you did it in such a shitty way that it doesn't feel earned. Especially like somebody who just becomes super famous over something dumb or whatever like that. And it's, you know, you do, I think most people do appreciate, at least most sane people anyway, appreciate when you notice that somebody's put in the hard work for that and has taken the time. You're putting in that work and dedication to do stuff, and that you didn't get famous super quick and everything. Like we said before about creating these movies and everything like that. Anybody who thinks they're going to go from who's going to get lucky right away and do something, like we said with like Fede Alvarez, who did some movies and then suddenly got Evil Dead. That was a rare occurrence. And you can tell Fede doesn't um he's not the kind of person who takes that for granted either. And same with David F. Sanborn.
Yeah.
He doesn't take it for granted either. Sure, he got up to Shazam level, work and everything like that, but he's still somebody who's doing stuff online. He connects with his audience and everything like that in a way that a lot of some of those other directors just aren't doing. And so they appreciate those where they came from.
Yeah.
And
100%. Yeah, because one of the things that'll happen is if you get famous too quickly, you don't see it as reflective of the work that you've done. You see it as reflective of you as a person, right? So you get it inflated. And I think a great example of this, we just talked about two guys who have done it really well and have remained somewhat humble and everything. But then you look at the other side of like a guy like Troy Duffy, who directed The Boondock Saints. There was an entire documentary called Overnight about that man's very public flame out in the aftermath of the making of that movie, where he thought he was the next Tarantino and he treated everybody like that. And that did not work out for him. And there is an entire documentary chronicling the sort of slow descent of that, which I'm only just now realizing, probably after, because I had seen it a few years ago. There's definitely a little bit of DNA of that documentary in my brain, in the character that I created. Is that idea, of getting something too easily and then it coming around to bite you in the ass as a result of you just accepting it without looking at it more than face value,
Right. No, and that's the thing. Like, I grew up, like, Tarantino was one of my first, movie heroes and stuff. So I can understand that desire, especially in the wake of all that. We all saw all the Tarantino clones pop up and everything. But Tarantino himself has always been fairly cautious, and he didn't Tarantino always had the ego that he has, so it was not like where a sudden like he thought everything was just going to come his way. He still hustled and worked at every movie he made along the way. And that's something I don't think a lot of people realize with him. They just see him make Reservoir Dogs, get famous off that, and then have a huge hit in Pulp Fiction and think, well, I can do that too.
Yeah.
And then
but they don't, of course, they don't know about My Best Friend's Birthday Party or whatever that first $5,000 film was that he made that no one's ever seen.
Right.
Yeah. So but also like you pointed out, again, that did happen to Tarantino, which I always say, if you saw it happen to someone else, that means it's less likely that it'll happen for you, not more.
Right. Yeah,
you
exactly.
Took that unlikely, that unlikely percentage has already been eaten up now by Tarantino. So you got to find another route, man. You got to do the Rodriguez route. Go make a $6,000 action movie, or you got to do the Jim Jarmusch route, or you got to do the
Kevin Smith route. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and they all made very different movies in slightly similar ways, but they definitely all carved their own path. And moving more recently, I can't remember his last name. Was it Rob? The guy who directed Host. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but
Rob Savage.
Yeah, Rob Savage. He did Host, in the midst of the pandemic. Him and board friends put this thing together, and it was a great achievement. And there are several people that are doing the same thing. It's like all we're ever updating now, we're not updating the principle, we're just updating the technology that allows that principle to take place.
Right. Yeah, and definitely, you did see some people following in that wake of Host where people are like, "Oh, well, I can do that too." And it's like, "Yeah, but he did it already. Like you come up with your own thing, do something interesting on your own and make it your own. Don't try to jump into his position." And I think that's the problem is just everybody tries to jump into that position as well, thinking that, "Oh, well, I can do something similar that's going to be just as cool." And
It's
sure,
so
it might,
funny to see, yeah, it's so
yeah.
funny to see indie filmmakers think exactly like studios, even though they hate studios, right? A studio sees a hit and they're like, hey, everybody make their own version of that. We're going to get rich. Well,
Yeah.
indie filmmakers do the same thing. They're like,
Yep.
hey, look at that guy. He did that. That's super easy. Let's do that. Instead of
Yeah.
saying, that's inspiring. Let's figure out how to do our version of that that's different
Right.
and speaks to ourselves.
Tell
So
tell
it's
our own
very funny to
story.
watch.
Yeah.
You know, you can point out the error in somebody else's behavior and then do the exact same thing yourself, you know.
Yep. Absolutely. So, so how long did it take you to make this movie?
So this is interesting. The actual amount of shooting time was not much. I never did more than two takes of any scene that you see in the movie.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason for that being a lot of these were stolen locations and stolen shots in real
Right.
places. You know,
Yeah.
like I didn't have a second take getting on the plane. So all that footage
Yeah.
of me getting on the plane, I had to shoot in the time I was getting on the plane, you know.
Right.
But so it was not a lot of actual shooting time, but it was spread out over quite a bit of time because and I said I was actually going to mention this. I knew that there was a
Yeah.
thing coming up in my life. It was going to be a big change. You can actually see it in the movie.
Right.
I had as a result of having been homeless for a long time, I had really bad. My front six teeth were really in bad shape. They were eaten away, and they were really sort of ugly looking. I was finally able to. I got a nice job. Was able to afford insurance and stuff, and I was going to get those front six teeth fixed. I had a fixed date that I would have new teeth,
Right.
new nice shiny front teeth. I thought, okay, I've got. Well, I think it was a month and a half until that surgery
Oh
was going to
wow.
happen. I said, okay, well, so here's the thing. That's an enormous change in life. And one day I'm going to have bad teeth, and then the next day, or then, a week later, I'm going to have good teeth. There's something interesting there. I got to
Yeah.
reverse
Yeah.
engineer and figure out how to do something with that because that's a production thing. That imagine how much money that would cost if I had to pretend I had bad teeth for the first half
Right.
of the movie or fake that I had nice teeth for the second half. So I was
Right.
like, all right, well, this is going to be a centerpiece somewhere. There's going to be a point at which they're bad and then they become good. What's interesting about that? And that's when I realized, well, what if I woke up one day and I just had brand new front teeth?
Yeah.
And that's where the reverse engineer came from was okay, that's the thing I'm going to work towards. So whatever comes before that change, I have to shoot all of that in the next month and a half.
Right.
And then that moment's going to happen. I can shoot everything else afterwards. So that's what ended up happening is I ended up shooting, I guess I would say probably the first 30 to 35 minutes in about a month and a half, all of that opening stuff. And
Right.
then got the surgery. Once it was done, the teeth were in, then I started shooting the second half of the movie. So while it was probably only about no joke, probably like a total combined amount of shooting would have been like 48 hours of actual shooting. It was spread out over 4.5 months.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So like the
No,
entire final act of the movie that has all the security camera footage, like when
yeah.
I get to his house and go inside, all of
Yeah.
that was shot in one afternoon in 2.5 hours.
Oh wow.
So that's what I mean when I say it was not a ton of time. We
Right.
did that final sequence in two takes. We had all the cameras set up in the house. In fact,
Right.
the final sequence, spoiler alert, the teething sequence that
Yes.
sort of wraps out the movie, I only had one take for that. I had to
Yeah.
do it all in one scene because it was raining outside, and we were so
Yeah.
cheap. I didn't have a second set of clothes to change into. So as soon as I walked outside, I would get rained on, my clothes would be soaked, and I was stuck. So
Yeah.
my friend that was there, it was his house. He was like, all right, I'm going to take your waterproof phone. I'm going to go shoot this scene outside. We get one, so I better not screw this up.
Yeah.
Um, so that was how a lot of the movie came together, was like me just sort of gritting my teeth and being like, it's this or nothing, you know?
No.
So,
No, it's the ultimate in guerrilla filmmaking in a lot of ways. So that's, I mean, that's awesome. You know, as somebody who was fascinated by that kind of filmmaking back in my early days when I, became like a hardcore film fan and everything, went to school for a little bit to, take film classes. It definitely, speaks to that, underground, guerrilla filmmaking that you see some people have done, where you're just, like you said, stolen locations, just, not doing anything with permits, which is great because, like, for the most part, given the story that you have for your movie, is it makes sense the way you're doing it because it's just how most people are doing their influencer videos and stuff like that. You're just walking around with the phone in your face, and so it makes a lot of sense to have done it the way you did it, and
Yeah.
it works out really well.
Yeah, and one of the things, there was an entire sequence I shot that was in an unfinished house where I go to hide from the cops.
Yeah.
That was literally an actual construction site that was about a half a mile from my house. I went there on a weekend because
Right.
they don't work on the weekend. And
Yeah.
I shot. And the interesting thing about it is it's like I'm obsessed with liminal spaces, the idea of spaces that
Yes.
you just transition through. That is
Yeah.
the most liminal space in existence because literally the only time that place, the way it looks, is in my movie. It
Yeah.
doesn't look like that anymore. It's a complete house now. In
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to find it on a map looking at
Yeah.
what I shot, right? So there's something magical about the idea that I went and shot on a location that literally can't exist anymore and no
Right.
one could ever find it. But I shot it there because I thought, well, no one will ever be able to trace it back either. So I couldn't
Yeah.
even get in trouble for being in this person's house because his
Right.
house wasn't even complete when I was in it,
You're right. It wasn't that person's house yet.
Right,
So yeah,
exactly.
no.
Yeah. Technically wasn't even a house. It didn't have an address on it. There was no mailbox. Like it was
Right.
literally just sort of a facade. So yeah, there's so many fascinating workarounds that you can come up with. Now, to be
Yeah.
clear, you and I do not get in trouble. I am
Yes.
not endorsing going to shoot on someone else's property
Yes. No
without
trespassing, please.
yes. But yeah, it's just, it's trying to think of things like that. Like,
Yeah.
there was a moment in the film where a character was being arrested in the background. It was being
Yeah.
arrested by police officers. That really happened.
Yeah.
We went to record in a school across the street. It was closed, so I decided I'm going to go to the parking lot of the grocery store to shoot this scene. And a
Yeah.
man was just being arrested in the parking lot. So I
Yeah.
said, "All right, set up the camera real quick. We're shooting this scene now while this is happening." And
Right.
we shot it, and then I had to reverse engineer the opening monologue of the scene to figure out how to tie it in to the scene. So
Right.
that's another advantage of I didn't write a script. I had a beat
Right.
sheet. And so I sort of worked. And that's why I could just on the fly be like, okay, that guy's going to get arrested in the background. And I have to now explain it through some sort of story element.
Right.
So much of
Yeah.
the movie that looks like production value, you might have thought that we arranged for fake police officers to arrest an actor. No, that was just a dude actually being arrested, and we just decided to shoot in front of it.
I mean, it is Florida, so that makes sense.
Exactly. So yeah, you throw a rock in any direction, you'll probably find someone getting
Like
arrested.
every corner, there's somebody getting arrested in Florida.
Yeah,
But we have so many
that's
Florida man stories.
it's one of our few renewable resources.
Oh man, that's great. No, that's just yeah, no, and that's what's great about the movie is that you can tell that, because it is so low budget and everything like that, you can, you get that flavor of just having to take advantage of stuff. And I like the fact that because you didn't have a script, you just kind of had ideas to kind of create a story around and everything like that, that you could have something that came up later on in the movie that you're filming and that could have formed something else. You could just insert a new scene earlier in the movie to then explain that scene, and so that that
100%.
that makes a lot of
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier, a lot more free form.
Yeah.
A lot more uh what is it? I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but just like a lot more natural in terms of like the storytelling because you can just do what you want to do. You
Yeah.
just
Well, it definitely made my performance better because I
yeah.
was really reacting oftentimes in real time to something happening. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, the scene where I say that my car was broken into and they snapped out
Yeah.
yeah, that happened. That my car was
Yeah.
actually taken on a joyride and the windshield wipers were broken off. And so I just wrote it into the scene. I was like, I'll be
Yeah.
damned if these fucking guys are going to take my car and trash it and I'm not going to get some sort of value out of this.
Right.
So I wrote it into the scene, and I had this scene where I was holding the broken windshield wipers in my
Right.
hands. And yeah, the reason for that solely was I was like, there's no reason for this to happen in my life and me not to get something out of it.
Yeah.
So
No, and that's great.
um,
That's great. Take advantage of those situations when you can, and to make it part of that. And I mean, that's great storytelling just to, you know, add that in on top of, whatever. Like I said, just take advantage of the situations around you.
yep.
Well, that already answered my other question was what were some of the challenges of making a movie like this? So
Yeah.
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 So you already
For me,
kind
the
of
biggest challenge, honestly, I've mentioned this before that I wasn't an actor, but the biggest challenge
yeah.
for me was, can I be convincing on screen? And that's
Yeah.
half the reason why. Like, I'm actually a very scripted writer. Like, I write very detailed scripts when I write
Yeah.
scripts for other people. But I also know I'm not an actor.
Yeah.
I can't write very complex dialogue for myself. to
Right.
shoot in scenes where I know that like this moment that I'm shooting is happening in between two meetings at a convention center where I've only got 3 minutes to be in this room. I don't have
Right.
time to make sure I'm hitting this dialogue right. I just need to know
Right.
the point of the scene, and then I go shoot for the moment that I have. And so that was for me, that was the scariest part was like,
Yeah.
is any of this going to be convincing on a human level?
Right.
And so that's why I didn't write lines because I knew it would just feel like I was trying to hit a line. I just
Right.
knew I need to know the kernel of what needs to be accomplished in this scene. And then if I can do that by just finding my own words in the moment to say whatever it is that I'm getting at, I'll know that it's natural because I'm naturally just trying to think of it, you know?
Right.
So it's sort of like that was the shortcut I used to accidentally be a good actor was to just fool myself into having to react in real time to whatever I'm
Right.
doing.
Yeah, and I think again that's the very nature of the story that you're telling as well too that lends itself to being more natural and not having to stick to a script and everything like that because yeah, if you were trying to do something more script like it would it would probably feel more unnatural. And since most of what you're trying to do is because you're not showing very much of the finished videos. You do a few times here and there, but for the most part, what you're showing is the in between, the conversations you're having to your editor, and you know the kind of the behind the scenes stuff. So I like that that's what you're doing is the more natural stuff, and just kind of telling that story there rather than you know,
Yeah.
and that's not to be said that like having a script wouldn't be a good idea for anybody who's listening and wants to make stuff like this. You know,
Oh,
feel
100%.
feel your own way through it. I mean,
Yeah. And
that's the thing,
I had a bullet sheet. I had a 50-point beat sheet of all the scenes
yeah,
that I needed. And I
right,
had a little bit of info about what needed to happen in them. But yeah, I would absolutely encourage whatever's going to get you the result that you need the
right,
best. If you've got an actual actor, give them lines. If you don't want to
yeah,
make them improvise, then you have to cut around all of the garbage that comes out because you're improvising. I
right,
was lucky enough to know what I needed. I was acting
yeah,
as the writer, director, and producer in addition to being an actor in any scene. So
right,
I had the added advantage, like Robert Rodriguez does. He knows when he punches in for a
yeah,
close up, he doesn't need anything but that. So he doesn't need to shoot coverage and waste time. I was
right,
able to do sort of the same thing, but as an actor, in addition to being in front of the camera. But yeah, no, you're totally right about the idea of their. I wanted most of it to be the behind the scenes stuff and not the clips themselves
right,
because I think there's a little bit subtly a satirical element in this movie in that I don't find most influencers to feel much like real people in their content.
yeah,
And so the reason I wanted it to be behind the scenes stuff is because I imagine that's when they seem like actual humans. When
right,
they get on
yeah,
the camera, there becomes that weird, there's the weird tone to their voice that
yeah,
becomes there's a flat affectation that's not offensive to anybody and just sort of becomes
right,
this noise that everybody gets used to because it sounds the same. You know, I
right,
didn't want, there's no way someone would watch that for 85 minutes, you know?
right,
So I had to figure out, well, what's the way to make this sound like a real person? So it
yeah,
couldn't be all of those clips.
right,
It's one of the reasons why I don't really follow influencers. It's just because I
yeah.
find it soul deadening myself
Yeah. Well, because
to
they're
watch.
playing a character. It's not who they truly are. And that's what
Right.
I think that's what's frustrating for me as a person who doesn't follow those people and to see so many people flock to them. It's like you're not getting the real person. They say they're the real person, but not only do they not look like that, they've mastered all the camera angles and everything that they want to do, but they also don't act like that in real life. So
Yep.
it's like everything that they're doing. But I do think it was necessary for you to include some small bits of each one of those just so that you could get the idea of who he is on
Exactly.
like in those polished videos so you could see yeah, you're getting all the behind the scenes but you're also seeing what he's like in those videos as well so you get to see the kind of character he's playing. So
Yeah,
yeah, no,
100%.
it's very 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 well done. So
Thank you.
um,
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
yeah. um I I found it to be a really good movie. I'm hoping a lot more people get a chance to see it. I know you said it's on what povhorror.com right now.
Yes. So POV Horror is the distributor that's putting it out. And so it is
Okay.
currently available on their site. If you go to povhorror.com, you can find the film there. If you have, there are a lot of people that have monthly memberships, which means you can watch it for free. If not, I think it's like $1 to stream it from
Okay.
POV Horror. However, we're in the midst of it is already submitted to several of the other platforms that people find most of their found footage on, Amazon
Right.
Prime, Tubi, places like that. So depending on when this airs and how long that process takes, in all likelihood, if you're coming back to listen to this later, it will probably be on those platforms as well. But as of like us speaking right now, it is
Right.
currently available on POV Horror. Yep.
Okay. Great. Yeah, definitely go check that out if you don't have that. I mean, obviously, it sounds like it's a fairly inexpensive way to check it out. So, if you're into found footage, definitely go check that out.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of fun for sure.
And I will say this is because I have had a lot of people that have been really supportive of this movie. It's gotten, I guess you would call it, it's not exactly a cult following. A cult following
Right.
is bigger than what I am at this point.
Right.
But this kind of movie only, well, really any kind of movie that's not a tentpole film lives and dies on the people that like it sharing that they like it.
Right.
I'm not just saying this about my movie. I'm saying this because my hope would be if there are small movies that you, Robert, like, or anybody listening likes, do whatever you can to share the like of it somewhere. If you
Right.
post on social media about stuff, post about the movie with a link, leave a review on IMDb or Letterboxd, because the thing is, I'm certainly not doing this to make money, as it sounds terrible, but
Yeah.
like, this is not a money-making scheme for me. I have a job that the only
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
is because I have a well-paying job during the day that allows me to
Right.
have stupid hobbies like this at night. So this is not what's going to give me a living. However, the reason I'm doing it is because I'm trying to connect to an audience. So
Yeah.
if a movie of any kind connects with you, please share that with other people to find that audience.
Yeah.
There's a movie that I saw when I was, what was in 2009, 2010. It was a film called Pontypool.
Yeah.
It's a Canadian horror film that all takes place inside of a church basement. And it's one of the best films I've ever seen. Anytime anybody asks me what my favorite horror movie is, I always mention that one. Even though it's a
Interesting.
$1 million Canadian film that almost no one has
Right.
heard of, I always preach the gospel of that film because that movie moved me so much that I want to make sure everybody else knows about it. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind, and especially anybody who's a creator. If there's other creators who you like, and make sure you're
Right.
supporting them. That's all
Oh
I
yeah,
ask.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I definitely try to, obviously with this podcast itself, I try to, push out, uh you anything, that people enjoy in terms of horror and other movies and such. That's what this whole podcast is about, is just for the love of movies. And really, and that's why I like having people like you on, people who are low budget filmmakers, and to have you on to help push that word out. I might have a small audience, but at least, with the few people that I do have, I can present this to them and they can check it out, and hopefully they will then spread the word. And and that's all we can do, is continue to
Yeah,
spread the word of especially, like, because everybody's going to go see the big things. Anything that's at the movie theaters or on a lot of the bigger streaming services, most people know about those things.
yep,
But these low budget films that you've made and other people have made, it's definitely word of mouth is key,
for sure.
100%. And
Yeah. And I
definitely,
think it's true across art forms too. Like you cover
yeah,
a lot of different
yeah.
stuff on here. There are so many indie video games, so many indie
Yeah.
comics, small presses, places that are putting out great stuff and they just don't have the volume necessary, like literal audio volume, to cut
Right.
through the crowd because there's so much stuff out there. So yeah, when you find something you love, and when I say you, I'm mostly talking to the audience because obviously,
Yeah,
Robert,
yeah.
you're so
Yeah.
that's the whole premise of the show is to do this, which
Right.
is
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely.
And yeah, I so much appreciate it. But yeah, I just, paying it forward to the people who it's become frustrating in recent years to see fandom become, rather than a thing that supports and loves and shares a thing, it becomes it has become, some areas of fandom has become critical of like feeling like they have some sense of ownership and getting mad at people for being involved and doing something different than they
Yeah.
would with that ownership. I feel the opposite. I'm like, I love being surprised by a thing I wouldn't have done with that.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
making a Halloween movie that's so far afield that potentially half the audience hated it.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it. I didn't entirely understand it. When I watched it the second time, I'm like, okay, you know what? I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Not what I would have done, but what
Right.
you did what you wanted, and it worked it worked to do what you were trying to accomplish. And for me, like that's the only reason anybody makes anything.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to say something. And
Yeah.
my ethos recently has become, and I thank David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return for this, is stop engaging with a piece of art on the level that you expect it to be and start engaging on the art with trying to take away whatever it is that you think that someone was trying to do with it.
Yeah.
You'll be much more satisfied watching a thing and going, what did they want to portray to me? What did they want to
Right.
tell me? What did they want me to experience? Did they do that? You'll find more often than not, at least for me, I've had much better experiences when I recognize this is the thing that someone else is doing, giving me the opportunity to see from their point of view, as opposed to how come they didn't make a thing that's closer to my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree completely. Yeah, when you start making movies to satisfy like the the audience's expectations, that's when you make uh very generic movies.
Yeah.
And you start to water down. Like it's a criticism. I'm a big MCU fan. I'm a big comic book fan,
Mhm.
obviously. And I've been a fan of Marvel since I was a kid. So seeing the MCU happen has been a big thing for me. And I understand some of the criticisms behind it, but I have always argued that because there's a large, not a large, but there's a vocal contingent of people who are like, oh, well, they're just all the same movie. They're not the same movie. They literally are making different movies every time. They may feel similar, but that doesn't mean they are similar. And I feel like those who are saying that aren't engaging with it correctly. And that just goes into like what you were saying. It's like stop expecting these movies to be what you want and meet them where they are at.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing for sure.
Well, and
Because
not to mention with the Marvel universe, it's not like you're just talking about Miramax, like every Miramax movie is the same. Like the Marvel universe is a comic book universe with superheroes in it. Of
yeah,
course, each of those movies is going to feel at least
there's
somewhat
going to be
similar
similarities.
because they
Yeah,
all take place in the same actual space, you know?
right.
Like I could understand if you were like every A24 movie feels the same and I wish they weren't. Well, at least there you're talking about a studio. Each one of these stories takes place in a vastly different world. If you
Yeah,
still thought they all looked and sounded exactly the same, at least that would make sense because they're not
yeah,
supposed to be. But like
yeah.
complaining about like DC or Marvel movies all seeming similar is like, yes, you've hit on what a franchise is.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's fair. You know, they're definitely going to have, you know, similarities. They're going to feel somewhat same and everything like that. But yeah, the people who seem to, and it's not always people, but there are some people who always seem to be the people who haven't actually watched that many of the Marvel movies or
Yeah.
something like that who complain they're all the same. And it's like they just complain that there's nothing new coming out, that it's always just Marvel stuff. And it's like, you're not actually going to the movies then. You're not actually looking at the stuff that's on the streaming things. There's so much, such a wide variety out there. You're focused on stuff that is not for you, obviously, if that's what you're saying. Like it's the people who constantly are like, well, why are we getting another horror remake? Why aren't they making new things? And I'm like, there's new horror being made
Yep.
every day. There's so much more new compared to the remakes and stuff. Like
Yep.
it just like you're not paying attention.
Yeah, those
So
kinds of when you hear a criticism like that, what they're actually criticizing is their own lack of curiosity,
yes,
the
yeah,
willingness to look around, you know, like
yeah,
it's there is a plague in the modern day that we have all information at our disposal, but
yeah.
we're lazier now than we were
Oh
before we
yeah,
had to go and like I remember when I wanted to see a movie, I would have to call a video store, call around to chains of video stores and
yeah,
ask if they had a copy. And if so, can you hold it behind the counter? It'll take me 10 minutes to drive there.
yeah,
And sometimes they would save it and sometimes they wouldn't. And sometimes
yep,
I would be out gas and my time
yeah,
driving over there and they rented it out to somebody. Like I remember a time when you had to work very hard to be entertained by something you wanted. And
yeah,
now people can't even be bothered to just like look on an AMC app for what else is playing besides
yeah,
Marvel movie, you know?
yeah,
Like there's
yeah.
there's something a little depressing to that.
No, it's absolutely. I've seen the thing too is that we used to think that lack of information was why we had stupid people in this world. But now we have the whole entire wide world of information at our fingertips, and people are more stupid today than they were before.
Yeah. Well, they,
You
they
know,
they become exhausted. They become paralyzed by options and they just decide not to look at anything, you know?
yeah. And they just look at the same things or they look in their little narrow views and stuff like that. They
Yep.
again, this goes to basically what you were saying with the movies. It's like, you know, with being fed entertainment that you want rather than um meeting that entertainment from its perspective.
Yeah. There's
And
so
so
little
yeah.
there's so little sense of adventure and danger in watching anything.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you come from I assume you come from the video store era.
Oh yeah.
You definitely came home with a movie that you'd never know anything about except the back of the
Yeah.
box that you read,
Yeah.
and you sat through the whole thing even though it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And there was one scene that was awesome, even though the rest of the movie was kind of garbage. But if you hadn't stuck it out because you spent your $3.99 to rent this thing, you wouldn't have seen that awesome scene. nowadays, like how many movies do you shut off on streaming after 20 minutes? You know what I mean? Like
I,
there's
to
there's
be fair,
even
I
those of us who
never
are preaching.
I never shut off movies whenever I'm watching them. I will stick through movies even if they're crap all
Sir,
the
I
time
salute you. And I
because
appreciate it because God knows mine would have been one of the ones that you might have shut off.
no. I literally watched a movie last night called Miami Connections from
Oh,
1987.
yes.
I was reminded of it. It's got a great stupid ass 80s song in it called Friends.
Yes.
Everybody should probably know this song if you haven't heard it. It's fantastic. It gets played everywhere. But I was re-reminded of it recently, and I was like, oh, I gotta actually watch this. I've been meaning to watch it for a while. It is a terrible movie. It is not a good movie. It's poorly acted. The story doesn't make any sense and everything like that.
But it's a
But
deeply watchable movie, though, which is a
but it,
different thing from
yes,
from a good movie.
but it's the interesting thing about it is that you can feel the love and affection that the filmmaker had for what he was doing and for all the people who were involved in it.
Yep.
And plus it's just got some banger songs in it, which is the
Yeah.
craziest thing. It's good. It does it's a dumb movie. It's very dumb, but it's definitely rewatchable. And I argue like, it everybody should give it at least one chance, get through it, at least get through half of it. And I think at that point you're just going to be like, okay, I can't not watch this because it's just so
Yeah.
bizarre and fun. Um and it definitely did not get the love it deserved back in the 80s. And to be fair, I mean, it probably it's surprising that it made it out of the 80s and it actually got some love. But I mean, that's what's great about places like Vinegar Syndrome and Severin nowadays is that they're
100%.
giving love to
Yeah.
those movies.
Well,
Um,
and one of the things I love about that movie or those kinds of films is I always get very frustrated when I see a movie that is winking at you about how bad it is, like it knows
yes,
that it's bad.
yeah,
That bothers me so much because there are so many people in the world that really want to make movies, and you
yeah,
got the money and the time and the resources, and you decided to make something that wink wink is crap.
yeah,
The thing about the Miami Connection that I love is that as bad as some of it is, none of those people are winking. Every
yes,
sinher person involved in that
they,
movie is sincere in their badness or
yeah,
sincere in their mediocrity,
yeah,
sincere in their how misled they were with whether or not this was a good line reading, you know?
right,
But like it's all sincere in the same way
yeah,
that Ed Wood is sincere, which is one of the reasons why I think his badness has stood the test of time,
yeah,
because no one loved filmmaking more than Ed Wood, even though
yeah.
there's
He was
arguably no one
terrible at it.
who was worse at it.
Yeah, yeah,
But there was a love and there's a passion for what he did. And that's where like
yes,
I separate the Plan 9 from the like Sharknadoes, let's say, where there's like,
yes,
I
yeah,
know, wink, wink, look how ridiculous this looks. Well, you
yeah,
had the chance to make it not look ridiculous. You're competent enough to have done better and you didn't.
yeah,
You should be punished for that, not rewarded.
yeah,
Whereas this guy, he did the best he could. It's almost like outsider art. Like he didn't know he
yeah,
was bad. He was trying, man. And
yeah.
that's why it's a piece of found art in some ways, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. And that's I think that's what's key to independent filmmaking and what makes it so vital in a lot of ways too is that you can make good, fun, funny stuff that is sort of winky
mm,
at things and everything like that, but you have to put the passion and the love into it. And I think that is what's missing from the Sharknado or the what there's that whole company that just makes
yeah,
knockoff
the
movies.
Asylum. Yeah.
Asylum, the
Yeah.
Asylum. I
Lava Lantula and yeah, all
yeah,
those
I
things.
haven't watched any of those things because they sound like they suck. And it's just they're not putting the passion behind it. They're just doing all
Yep.
the winks. They're
Yep.
not that love for actually movie making. They're the influencer kind of culture where they're trying to make something for the money of it. They're not making it
Right.
for the love of it. And that's that key is when it comes down to it with independent filmmaking. If you don't have the love for it, people know and people can tell. And you're gonna get it for a while. You're gonna get money for a while, but eventually it's gonna run out, and you're not gonna be able to get that audience back because they're gonna feel betrayed. So
100%. Yeah.
so
Sincerity comes across very strongly on screen. People can tell when
absolutely,
it's there. Even when other things are missing, if the sincerity is there,
yeah,
audiences will meet you more than halfway
yeah.
sometimes.
Well, that's like a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s and stuff like that that went direct to video, or even some stuff that just failed at the movie theater. It just, I mean, you look at something like The Thing, like we talked about before. The Thing did not do well at the theater. That was a good movie that just failed. Now, to be fair, I mean, it was in, like came out what, the week after E.T. came out.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah,
like,
the worst possible time to make a murderous alien movie is the
yeah.
week after the cute alien movie.
Yeah. So, but that one found its audience. And
Mhm.
because the movie was made with sincerity and heart, and you can feel that, as a John Carpenter fan myself, um, dude made movies to make movies for the love of movies.
Mhm.
He doesn't make movies uh for money. I mean, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
most of his movies failed in the box office. I'm surprised he got to continue making them as long as he did, based on just the fact that so many of his movies failed.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well, and what you're saying bears out in reality because if you look at the way that people in retrospect looked at his career is completely different than the way that it was looked at contemporaneously as it was
oh
happening.
yeah,
We
yeah,
look back now, and The Fog is one of the most evocative and like effective mood films
yeah,
basically made in the 80s. But
yeah,
when it came out, it was like shrug-worthy to the audience,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Or Escape from New York being one of the most brilliant straight-faced satires of
yeah,
conservative politics. Like all
yeah.
of these brilliant things he was doing that at the
They
time.
live, man. They live is my favorite, man.
Yep.
Like consumerism, capitalism, like it just that failed. It just, but it's met its audience now,
Yep.
and just
Yeah.
it's fascinating. It's
You're
just
right though. And a lot of it has to do with the sincerity. Like he said the thing he meant. It
yep,
wasn't well received at the time. And then later generations, unfortunately for him, because it doesn't get
yeah,
doesn't put money in his pockets now,
yeah,
but like time has vindicated him absolutely.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice to see. It would have been I'm glad it happened while he was still alive. There are some
yeah,
filmmakers who didn't get their flowers until well after they were gone. But
yeah.
it would have been nicer for it to happen earlier in his career when he still could have been benefited from somebody saying, you know what, he does deserve another $35 million to make
Right.
something.
Right. Well, and it's at this point because everybody because of how long it took to get that point. Now he's at the point where he's like, I don't want to make movies anymore.
Yeah.
They're a hard process, and all I'm going to do is get the same thing. They're going to hate it until 20 years later when they're going to love it. So why even bother with it? Because I'm not. But at this point, because he is older now, he's like looking down the barrel of that and going, they're not going to care until later, and I'm going to be dead. So why
Yeah.
even bother?
Yeah, I remember, I think it was David Mamet many, many years ago. He said a quote I loved, which is he said, every producer thinks the last thing you made is amazing and the thing you're making right now is shit.
Yeah.
Like that's the way it works in this industry.
Yeah.
How come it can't be good as the last one? But when I was making the last one, you thought it was garbage. But now that
Yeah.
it's out and I'm making something else, you think that was genius and you think this current thing I'm doing is stupid.
Right.
Like that's how it works.
Yeah, movie making doesn't make any sense, but yeah, but that's what's great about independent filmmaking. Like you said earlier, you when you're on this independent scale and everything, you have nobody to answer to. You're
Yep.
just making the movie for what you want to make it, and you hope you find that audience. And I think you will find that audience with this. It's I hopefully once it hits some more of those streaming sites that people flock to more, especially Tubi. I think you'll have a better chance of finding that audience. I think it'll connect more, especially in this age of social media and influencers and everything. So
Well,
it'll
from
kick
your
in.
lips to God's ears, right? But I mean, you're helping me, man. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I've listened to several interviews and conversations on your show, and you always you do this for whatever arena you're talking about. We know whether it's the comics or movies or whatever, and it means a ton because there's a lot of noise out in the world. So anytime somebody's taken the time to allow some of that noise to be about a thing that's not getting coverage, it's appreciated more than you could possibly know from the people who are just trying to have their stuff noticed.
yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to put it out there as best as I can and hope that I find an audience enough to help others find an audience as well, and just spread the love of movies and comic books and everything else that I get to talk about because I mean I'm just as independent as you are at this point. Like I'm just a voice in the wind, just hoping to find that audience. So Yeah, but
So
at the same time, I don't want to get famous. I like, I don't want to get to that level like where I'm beholden to other people. It's just I want to be able to do my own thing and enjoy doing it and just kind of, help spread the love as much as possible. So.
100%. So all we're asking listeners is to make us just famous enough,
Right.
but not too famous, right? There's a very
Exactly.
delicate balance. We'll let
Right.
you know when they're there. So
Right.
just keep making us more famous and we'll let you know when to
And
stop.
then we'll tell you to stop, and then that's it. No, no, no more.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, it was great having you on, man. I very much appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this. I was actually like thinking of because I had watched it like last week and I was like, I was champing at the bit to talk about it. But I'm glad we finally got a chance to. And this was a fun conversation about a very good movie.
Awesome. And well, I really appreciate you having me on. And it was absolutely a fun conversation. It's always tough. No, like you go into a room with someone you've never spoken to before, and you're like, how entertaining do I have to be about this thing I'm trying to get people to watch? So like you get nervous, like, do I
Yeah.
have enough anecdotes? You get like that flop sweat, like you're going to be on
Yeah.
the Tonight Show. Is my story going to be interesting enough? So,
Yeah.
but you make these sound very easy. So I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that also. Yeah, no, I try, I try to make everything very conversational and just have some fun with it because at the end of the day, I mean, that's all it should be is just two people having a good conversation about something that's fun and interesting. So,
Mission
uh,
accomplished.
thank you very much. All right, well, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
Yes. Well, so obviously I mentioned the movie you can find at
Yes,
povhorror.com. If you're looking for me specifically, first of all, I'm not sure why, and maybe you should talk to someone about that. But if you are trying to find me, if you want to follow me, the best place actually is to go is Bluesky. That is where
yes,
I spend the most of my time. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, but Bluesky is where if you want to interact or see anything I'm doing,
yes,
that's where it would be. And it's CK Vander K. My last name is Vander K. And I'm not going to spell it because if you start to type it in, there's not many of me. So you'll find me
yes.
pretty. So it's the letters CK and then my last name Vander K. And yeah, I'm on there posting pretty frequently about things that I find interesting and you probably won't. So that's my selling point.
Well, so far, we've been following each other for a few days now since we both came back to Blue Sky. So it's so far you've been interesting enough for me, so that works out,
There you go.
we have a
That's a
shared.
threshold. I'm
Yeah,
never
right.
looking to be the most interesting, just
Right.
interesting enough.
No, no, it's same. Like, I've been, we talked about this off air. We've been getting an influx of new followers and everything like that because, everybody's coming over to it now. And I know I'm getting a lot of people who've never followed me over on the other socials before. So because I don't recognize half of these people who are following me. But and I think that's, part and partial those starter packs. I think you actually created one, right? And I'm in yours.
I did. Yep.
So, and you'll be in my new starter pack as well. Um,
Hooray.
so yeah, but I think those have been key to gaining those new followers. But at the same time, I'm like, wait, hold on. You guys don't really know who I am yet. You guys might need to unfollow soon because I'm not that interesting.
Yeah.
So,
You're going to do some of those before you get too interested.
yeah.
Know this about me kind of post.
Right,
I've
right,
done a couple of those where I'm like, here's a reason why legitimately it would be worth following me. And then you can decide if this is good enough for you. They'll
right.
put up a couple of links of here's my nonfiction books, here's the film I made.
Yes,
Please feel free to peruse, and I won't be offended if you don't come back.
right. Yeah, I've done the same. Like, I have a horror podcast, but I don't think I've posted very much of actual horror on my thing. I've posted mostly comic book stuff lately. So, because that was my first love was comic book stuff. And so, that's my major thing. Plus, people do the horror stuff a lot better than I do. So I figure that, I'll just reblog them from time to time.
Well, someday we'll have to come back and we can talk about horror comics then, so we can
Yes,
combine those
definitely.
two. Because I do love me a few great horror comics. In fact, there was a Western horror comic I used to love that I've never found anybody else that read.
What
Um,
was it?
it's called Desperados. It was art by John Cassidy, who used to do
I don't.
Planetary.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Planetary is one of my favorite comic books of all
yeah,
time.
and
So yes,
Cassidy is one of my favorite artists, and
yes,
it's basically each issue is sort of like, what if this standard Western trope also had this other crazy thing in it, the
interesting.
supernatural thing, and I loved it. It's one that I just
Yeah,
don't hear anybody talk about, but
yeah,
I love me a Western horror, and there's so few movies
yeah,
that then I saw that in comics, I was like, oh, I have to check this
yeah.
out. It was great.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I hadn't read it yet. It's definitely one of those that's been on my list of things to check out. But speaking of Western horror, have you checked out The Pale Door by Aaron Kuntz?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yes, I
that's a
really
good
like
one.
that.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah, and it's the thing is like it sounds terrible, but like, as it was probably for you back in the 90s, like any superhero movie you were excited about, even if it didn't look great, like I will watch any Western horror film, even if it's like borderline garbage, because
Yes.
there's so few. Like literally I could
Yeah.
probably count on two hands
Oh
the
yeah.
number of Western horror films in existence, you know?
Yeah.
So I even
Hey.
almost watched the one that what's his name made, Glenn Danzig. He made a Western
Oh
horror. I still have not watched because I watched his first film and I have not been willing to put myself through his second film.
yeah. No, I've heard bad things about his first one. So yeah, definitely did not want to. I haven't checked that out yet, and probably won't. So
Save yourself.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on very much, and yeah, we'll definitely have to get you on. I'll get you on just as a regular guest for something horror centric, and we'll have a lot of fun with that.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Harper Smith. You can follow the podcast by going to creepyandgeeky.com and clicking on any of the social links. If you'd like to follow me, you can find my links at geekthulu.com. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the Coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.